Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to 19 Washington Square North, which is the home and intellectual center of NYU Abu Dhabi here in New York City. My name is Michael Pruganan. I'm a professor of biology here at the NYU New York campus. And I also run a laboratory at NYU Abu Dhabi working on genomics. And I have the pleasure and the privilege of serving as the academic director for 19 Washington Square North. So as many of you may know, over the course of the academic year, 19 Washington Square North, or as we affectionately call it, 19, is home to a variety of public events, including lectures, conferences, exhibitions and their openings. This is a place that serves as a meeting point for members of the faculty, students, and staff, both in NYU New York and NYU Abu Dhabi. And really, it's a place for the NYU New York and NYU Abu Dhabi community to meet, and the public also to meet and interact with each other, and hopefully to learn new things. A key partner of ours here at 19 Washington Square North is the NYU Abu Dhabi Institute in Abu Dhabi, New York, which organizes many of the activities here, including this event we have today. So I want to acknowledge the work of Sharon Hakaken Bergman over there in the corner, my partner in crime. She's the director of academic and research programs of the NYU Abu Dhabi Institute, who with her staff puts together many of the activities we have today. So today we are very, very pleased to see all of you in this conversation on the ethics of artificial intelligence. The conversation today will be moderated by Harold Scherson, who is Professor Emeritus of the Philosophy at the Tandon School of Engineering here in NYU New York, and has served on the inaugural faculties of not only NYU Abu Dhabi, but NYU Shanghai. Professor Scherson was head of the program in Humanities and the Social Sciences at Tandon, where he created and taught the first courses in engineering ethics and the philosophy of technology. He's a longtime champion of interdisciplinary studies, bringing the liberal arts into the discourse of engineering education. He was the scientific director of the UNESCO International Center for Engineering Education, based at Monash University in Australia from 1998 to 2010. He developed and taught a graduate-level technology ethics course at Beihang University in Beijing, which was selected as a national model course throughout China. He currently leads a technology initiative at the International Council for Philosophy and Human Sciences in Paris, and is a member of the Board of Scholars for the Chair on Geoethics of CIPSH at the National Institute of Geophysics and Volcanology in Rome, Italy. Additionally, he's an honorary faculty member and director of the Humanities and Engineering program at the Polytechnic Institute of Tomar in Portugal. Again, it is a pleasure to welcome you all here this afternoon for this event, and let us welcome to the podium Professor Harold Scherson, who will introduce the panel and lead a conversation.
Well, thank you, and welcome everybody. And I hope this is going to be an interesting event for all of you. And we, of course, are going to look forward to your comments and questions after the panelists have each given a presentation. I'm not a technician, but I've always been interested in technology. I thought I was going to be an engineer when I was in high school. But I also thought I was going to be a musician, and I thought I was going to do eventually be a chemist. And well, between organic chemistry and a lack of skill in music, and being interested in too many things, I became a philosopher. But philosophers ask questions and probe everything, and that's the spirit of today's event, asking questions. We're being faced with, very, very rapid changes, and I think they're going to have an extraordinary impact on all aspects of daily life as well as our institutions. And it seems to me that there are many questions which not only have not yet been addressed, let alone answered, but also questions which are going to impact our lives, in ways that we don't really anticipate. So there's room for theoretical discourse and there's room for a very practical and personal discourse. And I hope that both will be able to happen here today. I'm calling this the future of AI ethics, but ethics here really means questions of human welfare and human well-being, or the well-being of the planet, the well-being of the world we live in, what it means to be at home. You know, one of the shocking things about technology is that when Sputnik was launched, and I'm old enough to remember that day, when Sputnik was launched, it was celebrated. For what reason? It was celebrated widely because now we have the opportunity to leave the Earth. This is the first step in abandoning our home. So that's sort of the foreshadow of Elon Musk's promises to take us to Mars, and that's seeming in the minds of some people as, a reasonable proposition. So whether it is or it's not, I'm not trying to say, but what I'm trying to say, this is the kind of profound question that will come to us in concrete forms, whether we're ready for it or not. The term ethics is a term that refers to a branch of philosophy, but here we're really talking about the well-being of people. One of our panelists today, Jeff Sebo, is the co-author of a very fascinating and important report called Taking AI Welfare Seriously. You maybe want to look about it. He's going to discuss a number of the issues, but it seems that a starting point for his and the work of his colleagues is that the issues which at one time we might have thought of as coming off the pages of science fiction works now are coming off the pages of the New York Times. So we need to come together about this. Now, these are technical topics in many cases, and you need experts. But one problem is that it's increasingly difficult for experts to be able to talk to each other. They have their specialized terminology, their specialized methodology. They live in very intense research environments, and coming together to cross over between those intense and necessary and important research endeavors is how we can face the issues ahead of us. So that's how I hope we can proceed today. Now, our participants, and I'll say something about each of them before they begin, but three experts, all working not 100%, but together with other interests in the future of AI and helping develop AI. So the first person who will speak is Jeff Sebo. So before introducing him in more detail, let me mention that our second speaker is on the far right here, Ludovic Righetti, who's electrical and computer engineer. Actually, he works both in a mechanical engineering department and an electrical engineering department, but as he told me, he's really not either an electrical engineer or a computer engineer. But engineering is such a dynamic field these days that these traditional disciplines maybe don't describe the work that's being done. He directs a lab called Machines in Motion. This means robots that do clever things. And he's going to tell you about them and talk about whether their cleverness begins to approach anything like, human thinking or human consciousness or human feeling or human agency or human choices. Our third speaker today has not yet arrived. She's finishing up a meeting across the way, but she'll be bustling in soon, is Julia Stojanovic. She is a computer and data scientist. She is the director of something called the Center for Responsible AI, and she's going to talk about issues of AI governance and managing AI. Her sort of motto for what she does is that to work to make AI just always responsible. It's not a question, should we have responsible AI, and possibly not, but that AI as such will be responsible. So those are our speakers. Now, about our first speaker, who I will yield to in a minute, Jeff. He's a philosopher like myself, an animal rights activist. He's a clinical associate professor of environmental studies. He's director of animal studies program at the master's level here, and affiliated professor of bioethics, medical ethics, and philosophy. He specializes in animal ethics, bioethics, environmental ethics, agency. In other words, do we make choices and act? And could machines ever make choices and act? I mean, we always like to say, well, they're just programmed, right? But now, with artificial intelligence, the idea of machines that, acquiring a kind of agency has become an issue and a question. But issues of moral status, moral, legal, and political philosophy, ethics of activism, advocacy, and philanthropy. So he's going to talk about as AI becomes more sophisticated, the increasing kind of expertise that's necessary. Now here comes Julia, right on time. I've mentioned you already, and I will introduce you a little bit more when it's your turn. So with that, let's welcome our first speaker, Jeff Sebo.
Well, thank you so much, Harold, for, first of all, organizing this, and second of all, the kind introduction. Thank you also to the Institute for hosting, and to everybody for being here for the conversation. Looking forward to the conversation. As Harold noted, I am a philosopher, and I also direct the Center for Mind, Ethics, and Policy here at NYU. And at the Center for Mind, Ethics, and Policy, we do research and outreach and field building about how we should understand the scope of the moral circle. So what do we mean by the moral circle? We basically mean our conception of who belongs in the moral community. To whom are we accountable? To whom do we have responsibilities? Who deserves consideration and respect and compassion when making decisions that affect them? Now, obviously, for most of human history, especially in the West, we have tended to have quite narrow conceptions of the moral circle, extending consideration at most to select humans, maybe the occasional charismatic companion animal. Everybody in this room now recognizes that we should, in fact, expand the moral circle much more widely. We should extend consideration, at the very least, to all humans and many non-human animals, at least mammals and birds, maybe others affected by our actions and policies. And we still have a long way to go in order to live up to even that aspiration. But as we do that work, we can and should, we have the opportunity and the responsibility to ask, should we go farther? And if so, how far should we go? And how fast should we go that far? What should the details be? What follows for our policies and our priorities, our presumption of human exceptionalism, this idea that we always matter the most and always take priority? So for example, we can ask, do we owe some consideration to the other vertebrates, the reptiles, amphibians, fishes, to any invertebrates, cephalopod mollusks like octopuses, decapod crustaceans like lobsters, insects like ants and bees? What about plants, fungi? What about species and ecosystems? And what about increasingly advanced AI systems? Now, especially with increasingly advanced AI systems, it can be easy to dismiss that question as mere science fiction or a problem only for the possible far future. Unfortunately, I think it is not mere science fiction, not merely a problem for a possible far future. It is at least potentially a problem for the near future. And given the fast pace of technology and the slow pace of social and legal and political progress, that makes it a problem for today. And so we have a responsibility to start taking the issue seriously today. Not because AI systems definitely do or will have morally significant interests, but rather because, first of all, they might have morally significant interests in the near future. And second of all, society will have increasing disagreement and uncertainty about whether they have morally significant interests. And we will have to work hard in order to prepare for both of those scenarios. So first of all, why do I think that AI systems might have morally significant interests in the near future? And why does that matter? Well, it matters because this is an important and difficult issue, and that makes it a classic paradigmatic case of high-stakes decision-making involving disagreement and uncertainty and risk, and that calls for caution and humility. So first of all, this is an important issue because the stakes are high. It can be both easy and costly to make mistakes in either direction. Of course, it can be easy to over-attribute sentience, moral significance to AI systems. That can be especially easy when they look like us or act like us, and when we classify them as companions, as we do with many current large language models. They have realistic language outputs, and so we have a tendency to anthropomorphize and over-attribute human traits to them, even if they lack those traits. And that can be costly and harmful. For example, it can lead people to inappropriately experience themselves as having significant social and emotional bonds with mere objects, even make sacrifices for the sake of their relationships with mere objects. It could lead us to misallocate resources that humans and mammals and birds really need towards mere objects that in fact have no interests or needs at all. But it can also be easy and costly to make mistakes in the other direction too, to under-attribute sentience and moral significance to non-humans of various kinds. And that can, of course, be bad as well. This is especially easy when they look and act differently than us, and when we classify them as commodities, as we do with many farmed animals, and especially with many farmed aquatic animals and invertebrates. And that can, of course, be very harmful too. It can lead, for example, to factory farming, to industries that involve mass exploitation and extermination of sentient, vulnerable beings against their will, often at vast scales and often for trivial reasons. So the issue is important because the stakes are high, mistakes are easy and costly in both directions, and that means there is no easy, obvious, straightforward way to err on the side of caution. And yet the issue is difficult because it sits at the intersection of some of the hardest problems in ethics and science. In ethics, we have ongoing, substantial, expert, and public disagreement and uncertainty about what it takes to matter for your own sake and deserve consideration and respect and compassion. Do you need to be sentient, capable of consciously experiencing positive and negative states like happiness and suffering? Or is it enough to be conscious without being sentient, to be able to have subjective experiences even if they lack a positive or negative valence? Or is it enough to be agentic without being conscious, to be able to set and pursue your own goals in a self-directed manner, even if it feels like nothing to be you? Experts disagree. And then on the science side, we have ongoing substantial expert disagreement and uncertainty and public disagreement and uncertainty about which types of entities can possess those capacities. For example, to be conscious, do you need a brain with the exact structure and functions and materials as human or mammalian or avian brains? Or is it enough to have a cognitive system with broadly analogous capacities for perception, attention, learning, memory, self-awareness, flexible decision-making, maybe a global workspace that coordinates activity across those modules? Or is it enough to have a cognitive system that, in a more basic way, simply processes information or represents objects in the environment? Experts disagree. And these disagreements, these uncertainties are likely to persist. We are not on the cusp of a secure theory of moral standing or a secure theory of consciousness, for example, about which we can have anything approaching consensus or certainty. Our fundamental predicament is that we are one kind of being with one kind of mind, sharing a world with and exercising power over many other kinds of beings with many other kinds of minds without knowing for sure what, if anything, it feels like to be them. That is a classic case of high stakes decision making involving disagreement and uncertainty, a classic case of risk, and that calls for caution and humility. Why, for example, should we take AI safety seriously? Not because AI systems will definitely cause catastrophic harm to humans and animals, not even because they probably will cause catastrophic harm. There might be only a 1 in 100 or 1 in 1,000 chance that in the near future, AI systems will cause catastrophic harm. But if there is a 1 in 100 or 1 in 1,000 chance that in the near future, AI systems will cause catastrophic harm, that at least deserves consideration. It should at least be one factor among many in decisions about whether and how to scale up this increasingly powerful technology. Similarly, I argue with my colleagues, why should we take AI welfare seriously, the possibility of AI systems with morally significant interests? Not because AI systems definitely will have morally significant interests in the near future, not even because they probably will have morally significant interests. There might be only a 1 in 100 or 1 in 1,000 chance that AI systems will have flickers of their own form of happiness or suffering or satisfaction or frustration in the near future. But if there is a 1 in 100 or 1 in 1,000 chance that AI systems will have even flickers of their own form of happiness and suffering and satisfaction and frustration, that at least merits consideration. It should at least be one factor among many in decisions about whether and how to scale up this increasingly powerful technology. Now, how can you go about estimating the probability of consciousness or moral significance in a non-human like an AI system? Well, we have a technique called the marker method that we can use to make at least rough probability estimates under uncertainty. The way the method works is you can start by introspecting. I can introspectively tell the difference between conscious processing and non-conscious processing in my own experience. I can tell the difference, for example, between when I consciously experience pain versus unconsciously have a nociceptive response to noxious stimuli. We can then find observable behavioral and anatomical markers that reliably correspond with conscious processing in humans and look for broadly analogous behavioral and anatomical properties in non-humans of various kinds. Now, when we find those properties in non-humans, that is not proof of consciousness and moral significance. It does not establish certainty. Proof and uncertainty are unavailable when you lack a secure agreed upon theory of consciousness and moral significance. But when you find many of those properties clustered together in particular kinds of ways, it can at least serve as evidence, and it can at least tick up the probability under uncertainty. So with other animals, for example, we can look for not only whether they have brain and body structures like ours, but also whether they have behavioral profiles like, do they nurse their own wounds? Do they respond to analgesics and antidepressants in the same ways that we do? Do they make thoughtful behavioral trade-offs between the avoidance of pain and the pursuit of other valuable goals? With AI systems, we are not at present able to rely on their language outputs or behavior outputs in the same kind of way, because first of all, they lack the anatomical and evolutionary continuity that allows those behaviors to serve as evidence in the case of animals. And second of all, because we know that many AI systems were specifically designed to mimic human behaviors. But we might at some point be able to design AI systems whose behavior is stronger evidence. And in the meantime, we can look underneath potentially misleading behaviors for underlying architectural computational evidence of capacities associated with consciousness according to a range of leading scientific theories of consciousness. Like, do they have architecturally, computationally, capacities associated with perception, attention, learning, memory, self-awareness, flexible decision-making, a global workspace that coordinates activity across these modules? Now, what do we find when we look for these properties in non-humans of various kinds? Well, with animals, when we look for them, we tend to find them. Obviously, the evidence is mixed and incomplete, but there is now wide agreement among experts that there is at least a, quote, realistic possibility of consciousness in all vertebrates, mammals, birds, reptiles, amphibians, fishes, and many invertebrates, including, at minimum, cephalopod mollusks like octopuses, decapod crustaceans like lobsters, insects like ants and bees. With AI, we are not finding much architectural evidence of properties associated with consciousness in current large language models and other AI systems. But we are also not finding any technical barriers towards the creation of AI systems with advanced and integrated versions of all of those properties in the near future on roughly current types of architecture. And we know that companies and governments have a strong incentive to race towards the development of exactly those kinds of AI systems, because many of the properties that are associated with consciousness are also associated with general intelligence. Now, that does not mean that consciousness and intelligence are the same, but they do have overlapping underlying properties. So as we race towards the creation of artificial general intelligence, we may, like evolution did with us and other animals, accidentally create sentience and consciousness and agency and moral significance along the way in the pursuit of other goals. So, even if there is not a strong chance of moral significance in current AI systems, there is at least a realistic, non-negligible, non-trivial chance, given the evidence available to us right now, of moral significance in some near future AI systems. And in any case, societies will continue to disagree and be uncertain about this issue regardless of the facts. That means we have a responsibility to start taking this issue seriously now. And in my closing remarks briefly, I will say what I think that means for researchers, companies, governments, and other actors in this space, and then looking forward to the conversation. The minimum necessary first steps, not the last steps, but the minimum necessary first steps are acknowledge, assess, and prepare. First of all, acknowledge that AI welfare is a credible, legitimate issue. Stop dismissing it as mere science fiction or as a problem only for the far future. Acknowledge that this is at least potentially an issue for the near future. Societies will be reckoning with it, and that makes it an issue for serious thought today. Second, start assessing leading frontier models for welfare-relevant properties, drawing inspiration from techniques that we already have for exactly that work in animal welfare science. Third, start preparing policies and procedures for treating AI systems with the appropriate level of moral concern moving forward, drawing from a wide range of policy templates, like templates AI companies already have and governments already have for AI safety, as well as ethics oversight frameworks that we already have for research on vulnerable human and non-human animal populations. These can once again serve as sources of inspiration and in some cases cautionary tales. Is this going to mean that we start giving legal rights and political rights to AI systems tomorrow? No, it does not mean that, and it should not mean that. But it does mean we can start in a principled way thinking about this issue, drawing from the best philosophy and the best science and expert and public input so we can make informed and rational, defensible and legitimate decisions about how to interact with this technology moving forward, mitigating the risk of over or under attributing consciousness and moral significance to AI systems. And that will give us a chance of preparing for when this really reaches a boiling point and becomes a more significant societal issue. It will prevent us from being caught flat-footed the next time a major public debate emerges about the issue. We can offer a principled response rather than racing and asking the PR teams what they suggest we say, which is so far the strategy. All right, I will stop there. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much, Jeff, for that fascinating and provocative and very thought-provoking presentation. And I'm sure that we all have many questions and issues that we'll reserve enough time for at the end. Jeff mentioned in his talk the concept of the moral circle, and I forgot to mention in my introduction that his recent book, which has been getting very strong reviews, is called The Moral Circle, Who Matters, Why, What Matters, and Why. So I can commend that book to all of you. So our next presenter is Ludovic Righetti. He's educated mostly in Europe. He's been in the United States now for several years. He's involved largely in work with robotics and robotics that interact or interface or, get in the business of human beings very much, whether that's on the industrial level or on other levels. So he's going to talk to us about that today. I want to underline that Ludovic very much is committed to the idea that technology can and must be for the betterment of our lives and the betterment of society. He does not engage in defense-related research and things like that, for example, in order to advance this commitment and advance the commitment of the scientific community to a better and more humane society for all of us. So I'm looking forward to your comments.
Hi, everyone. Since I'm a roboticist, I need to show you videos of robots. Otherwise, that would not be okay. Sorry. Oh. All right. Okay. Let me start. So I decided to change what I wanted to talk about today at the last minute because of a discussion I had with the students in my class yesterday. And so I'd like to share this video that came out I think last week from Kawasaki, with a company who makes motorcycles, right? And this is their new product. So what do you think? What? Called what? Voltron. Okay, scary.
No, it's anime.
Oh, anime. Oh, okay. Sorry, didn't have the reference. It's very advanced, right? It's really impressive, right? So this is what's advertised. If you go on their website, it's that's the video that you can find. And I asked the students in my class, say, what do you think? And it's really cool. I'll say, but then I asked them, who thinks this is a real robot? Who thinks this is a real robot? Okay, this is not a real robot. So if you look at the news, actually, the news say there's a new robot that can do all these things. This is really impressive. It behaves like a horse. You can now ride robots. This is the future. This is how the world is going to be, and this is the future, and you don't have a choice, right? But this is not real. The robot exists. It cannot do any of the things that you've seen on this video. This is all animated graphics, right? This is not a real thing. And I think it's extremely important to make the distinction between our dreams as technologists and what is real, right? What is real is not what you see in videos. This is probably not what you see. We all have different interests. And I usually try to convince you that robotics is amazing because I need funding and I need to keep my job, right? And we all have interest, right, in why we tell you or why we tell people what technology will be able to do in the future. And this changes basically how you think what is possible in the future or not. So maybe here's my next 1 minute. How do we look at a robot video? So maybe if I can teach you one thing. Here's a robot video of a company called 1X. They do a really cool robot. And this is how it looks like. It's a real robot, in this case, right? So I don't know what you thought about looking at this. Maybe some of you think, yeah, this is a robot that is going to be being able to do chores in my house. It's very advanced. It looks like a human. It actually seems it's looking at its hands, so it seems that there's some sort of consciousness, at least understanding of what's happening and things like that. Here's what I think I see as someone who actually designed those kind of things. I saw a robot that was standing like this and never left its foot. So what it tells me that this robot cannot walk, right? First thing, so I'm going to replay it, right? This awkward posture where the 2 feet are very large and it doesn't move. The hand, it looks at its hand, so it gives you the sense that it knows what's happening. But the only thing that it's doing something like that, and the 10 fingers are useless. You have not seen the 10 fingers do anything of relevance, right? So if you ever look at a robot video, look at what it shows you, but also look at all the things it didn't show you. Because usually that tells you what doesn't work. If each time you have something that is actually working on a robot, you want to show it. If you don't show it, it means it doesn't exist, right? That's another thing to keep in mind between dreams, the trying to give you a feeling of what might be possible in the future and what is real today. And this is not the same thing. Okay, so what is the real state of the art in robotics? And especially work with leg robots, so let me tell you. So actually, this is true. If you go in any robotics conference, you will see robots everywhere walking around. This is quite amazing, actually. And these are all real robots, and they're all working really well. And what has really happened is like the technology, it's not that we had suddenly like a complete change in paradigm or things like that. So we got robots that are much cheaper, we had much better computers, and suddenly we can do really, really complicated things that we were not able to do 20 years ago, right? So it's not necessarily a paradigm shift, it's just the fact that now we have access to a lot of things and it's democratized. Anyone can get a robot. So there's two technologies to do that. One is called predictive control, and this is what you will see if you look at the Boston Dynamics robot, at least the one from 2 years ago. Another one is called reinforcement learning, which this is what you will see. This is Unitree, is another company who makes this leg robot. It's super impressive. So let me try to explain you a little bit how it works. So we can call that, this is AI type of algorithms, but actually let's see really what it is. So if you have a model predictive control, the idea is that what you do is that you try to write a software that says, what is the next thing I should do? And you try to compute that all the time. So for example, if I'm walking, you say, what is the next step? Where should I put my foot on the ground? And you keep doing that. Every, 1,000 times a second, you ask yourself, where should I put my foot on the ground? And then you move your robot so that he puts his foot on the ground where you want. And the idea is that say, well, if I want to go from A to B, I should maybe do this. Then you start doing that. Usually when you start doing that, it doesn't really happen as you expected. Maybe things change, so you keep redoing it, and you keep doing that forever. So basically, there's not really much intelligence. What you really end up doing is solving a small optimization problem, and you try to do it really, really quickly. And basically, you find optimal ways of behaving in real time. Reinforcement learning, you do the same, but offline on a simulator. So you have a simulator that simulates the physics of your robots. You do that. You use a lot of compute and GPUs, you do that a lot, and then you get basically in memory, you encode that in a neural network. It means you memorize that. You memorize all of that, and then you can run this on your computer. These two things, and you can do a lot of things in between. These two things, basically, they're numerical optimization problem. So if you forget about AI, what they are is you just try to minimize the function. If you've ever heard about gradient descent, this is literally what you do. You try to find the minimum of a function. And if you can find it, then you're done, and the robot will do something, and it's going to work really well. And we do the two things in my lab. So that's kind of technologies we develop. On the left, that's model predictive control. So it's kind of things we do with in my lab. On the right, that's what we did with reinforcement learning. And you see the robot is really impressive, right? And if I just show you and I would stop the video here, you would say, yeah, this is really, really impressive, right? It works really, really well. So I'm going to let the video play until the end, because you should always never forget that robots actually, well, when something happens that is not expected, it doesn't work, because my robot is as smart as a chair, right? It's not much smarter than, I mean, I'm serious when I say that, right? So the robot, we don't have an algorithm that allows my robot to figure out what to do when this happens, right? We just don't know how to do that. The other thing we're trying to do is to plan and get reasoning. So what we have is that we're solving problems where you say, well, the robot needs to put these cubes in this big circle, and the big cube, you cannot grasp it, so it realizes it needs to push it, right? So the robot, the algorithm online realized that it needs to push the cube to put it at the right place. The small cube, it can actually grasp it, so it's going to grasp it. There's no need to push something you can grasp. And then the green cube, it's going to pick it up. But if you put it too far, you cannot pick it up. So you realize you can use a tool to do that, right? So we're trying to implement some sort of reasoning to do that, right? Which, you know, I think this is really cool. I'm really proud that we can do these things. But this is just solving a small optimization problem. I mean, it's slightly bigger. There's nothing really intelligent. If you change things a little bit more, then the robot doesn't know what to do and it does stupid things and it's whatever, right? So again, it works in very small limited case for very small problems. And what you're really doing I use words like the robot decides to do things or it realizes it can use a tool, but none of this really happens. There's a list of options that we design by hand, and the robot tries these options and picks up the one that works, right? There's no conscious decision making that is going on here. It's just some very simple computer program that I can show you to convince you that it is not, there's nothing else going on. So what are we doing with that? So now I try to explain you that there's a difference between what we think we might be able to do in 100 years from now and what we can actually do today. Try to explain you very briefly the technology that we put behind words like artificial intelligence, which is maybe, you know, there's nothing intelligent. It's actually just, you know, it's mathematics. And so what do we do with those? You know, you can imagine that you could have robots, I don't know, that will deliver packages for you, that will do some construction work, some firefighting, maybe some nurse or doctors, or maybe you want robots in the police or in the military. And some of you might think that some of these applications are really good ideas. Some of you might think that some of these applications are really bad ideas, and it's very likely that we don't agree, right, on these things. The reality is that probably nobody ever asks you what you think about that, and there's people who try to do all of these things, right? So there's a democratic problem because there's no discussions about what we should build or not. And, you know, there's things you might not like here, and things you might think are really cool idea. So I think it's worth discussing. And so to finish, the thing that I think is important, and again, I'm really an engineer, I'm not really someone who does ethics, right? Technology is not value-free. And when we try to convince you about the future and what the future might look like, we shape possibilities, right? We change the imagination of what is possible or desirable, or what is going to happen no matter what. Right, this sense that you don't have a choice, no matter what you say or decide, robotics will happen and it will take over the world, type of thing, right? This is not true, right? Let me take you an example that I feel personal about because I grew up in France and then I studied in Switzerland when we had a lot of trains. And when I finished my PhD thesis in 2008, everybody was saying that we would have self-driving cars in 5 years from now. So 2008 was 18 years ago. How many self-driving cars have you seen today? Okay, it's 5 years ago. It's still 5 years away from today. But it has shaped our imagination, right? As of now, we put a lot of money, not we, but you know, society has put a lot of money, effort, educated people to work towards self-driving cars, deciding that was the way, that was the future. This is how we're going to change our landscapes, at least especially in the United States. And while we were doing that, we didn't put money in doing other things. In 18 years, we could have built trains, right? We could have trains that go faster. But we didn't do that because of how we put the idea that this was the thing to do. There was no other alternative. And this is engineers who tell you this is the way to do. Closer to New York City, right? We are buying quadruped robots to do policing. And this has a cost. It's not just imagination and the future. At the same time, that's the moment that we decrease the amount we put of money that we put in the education budget, right, of New York City. Because of one of these robots is the salary of a teacher for a year, right? Democratization. I was saying robots are great. If they can democratize, everybody can use them. It also means misuse. So one of the things that is more than thinking about terminators in the future, right? It's your use of drones and open source robots or easy to acquire robots have been very useful, for example, in Ukraine to stop the invasion by Russia, which, you know, you would argue that's maybe a great thing. but they pose a lot of problems in terms of how do you say that, war laws and things like that. And this creates a lot of problem because you can imagine all the misuse you can do with that. So for this, maybe you will all agree that maybe this is great because it really helps certain people to defend themselves and things like that. But what if it's Daesh doing that, right? You can use the exact same technology. It's all free, it's all accessible. And there's literally not, and anyone with a 3D printer can do that. It takes you an hour to build a drone that will explode, right? I'm not going to go, you can imagine all the horrible things we can do these things, right? So democratization and opening this kind of technology also means a lot of responsibilities behind. How do we limit that? How do we make sure that they're only used for good things? So how do we do responsible robotics with all of these things? So the first thing that we need to educate engineers to think deeply about what they do, what might be the social consequences of what they do, and try to think about what kind of technology they should develop and what kind of technology they should maybe do something else, right, in certain things. We should also think to talk about more honestly about what we do and what works and what doesn't work. The second thing is that hopefully we should talk to people that are not engineers to explain them what is real, what is not real, what we don't know might be real in the future. There's a lot of, I don't know what the future looks like, but there's things I know are going to be very hard to make and things I know are probably going to be very easy to make. We should reward exchanges between roboticists and society, right? There's a lot of, as I said, I guess nobody ever asked you if self-driving cars were a good idea, right? We still poured hundreds of billions of dollars in it. Maybe it's good if you ask people what we should do or not. And sometimes maybe it's okay to hear that we should not do certain things even if I don't agree with it. I think open science is great because at least everybody has access to that. Democratization is great, but we should think about how do we moderate things that are potentially dangerous. And lastly, maybe we need regulations as well. So that's something that may be very practical. To just finish this discussion, I wanted to point, I'm involved also with Julia in an initiative organized by the United Nations Office for Disarmament Affairs and the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute. We're working on a responsible AI for peace and security. And so if you're interested, there's their website, they have a very cool blog, and they have also a podcast. So I'm just slightly related to that, but they do amazing work. So if you're interested, I really recommend that you check out what they're doing. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for another rich and stimulating talk, opening up so many issues for us. We may need to stay most of the night to cover all of the issues in our discussion. At any rate, without anything further, I'd like to introduce Julia Stojanovic. She's the director, perhaps the founder of the Responsible AI Society, and is going to, I think, address many of the topics in concrete ways that we've already spoken about. So thank you, it's yours.
We need to figure out how to connect very quick first. Does this work? All right. Okay. So thank you for the opportunity to speak to you all, and thank you all for coming. I didn't know exactly what to talk about, so it's gonna be a bit of a stream of consciousness, I guess, right? The main idea that I want to impart is that we don't want to live in a world in which there are two kinds of AI, responsible and one that is just. So rather, we should be trying our best to make responsible AI and AI synonymous. So by way of introduction, I'm Julia Stojanovic. I'm a computer scientist by training and by practice, and I have a joint appointment at NYU. I am an associate professor of computer science and engineering at Tandon, and also associate professor of data science at the Center for Data Science. And as Harold mentioned, I founded and direct a center at NYU called the Center for Responsible AI. And as part of that work, I have the pleasure and the privilege to collaborate with people like Ludo. And I hope to expand the collaboration network much, much further. If you'd like to learn more about what we do at the center, please take a look at our website. And in a nutshell, it's a combination of research that is socio-technical, as well as policy work, and also public engagement and all kinds of education, training, and public literacy efforts that we undertake. And you will see lots of graphics on our website and in my slides and in the things that we produce. These are all made by humans. I don't use AI to make art. This in particular was made by Fala Arif Khan, who is a talented artist and a data scientist. And I hope that if sound works, I'll be able to show you also an animated short that was made by a professional animator, Alex Budovsky. So, which brings me to this statement that inspires a lot of my work, and that is, many of you have seen this, I'm sure. Joanna Machevska said, you know what the biggest problem with pushing all things AI is? Wrong direction. I want AI to do my laundry and dishes so that I can do art and writing, not for AI to do my art and writing so that I can do my laundry and dishes. And so I don't know whether sound is going to work, but I want to attempt to actually show this cartoon, if I dare, that really gives my point of view on all things AI and also starts to outline what my values are, and then I'll talk about this as well. You can kind of hear it, yeah? All right. So the main point here is agency and control, of course, right? And people made this cartoon, an animator, a composer, and the voice was my 11-year-old son singing. So that was fun for us to do. Wait, where is my slide deck now? Uh-oh. Sorry about this. Let me disconnect for a second so I can find where my slides went. Apologies about this. All right, I'm back. Now it's connecting. Okay. So you can watch it on YouTube, and there's also a version that is colorblind friendly, where Alice wears a blue dress, and the color contrast is different. Right. So what are my values when thinking about AI and deciding whether to work on AI in a particular domain or not to work, and deciding on whether to take money? And I should say, so you mentioned, Ludo, that you don't work on defense-related topics. I don't work on the use of AI in the criminal justice because I don't think we should be using AI there. And I don't take money from industry for research. I have taken money from industry to develop open source educational materials like this cartoon, right? But I don't actually engage with them in other ways. So when I think about the role of AI in society, I think very simply about beneficence, justice, and equity, right? I mean, these are all words that we have used, but we need to reflect on them when deciding on what impacts an AI system would have on individuals, groups, communities, and society at large. And increasingly, more importantly, we should be thinking about the environmental sustainability of the systems that we build and the impact on the planet, right? Uh, and there's this narrative about that I won't talk about much today or at all, that AI is going to save us from climate change. I don't know. I feel like we're just using lots and lots of compute to do silly things that we should be doing ourselves anyway. So let's maybe think about that a little bit harder. And as Alice helped me demonstrate, one of the main things that I care about is agency and control that we as people should have over our interactions with AI systems. So responsible AI doesn't mean AI is responsible. Nonsense, right? And AI is, as smart or as dumb as a chair, as Ludovic just explained to us, right? So it cannot consciously make a decision that benefits or hurts us, right? It cannot take responsibility for mistakes, like in lethal autonomous weapons, where somebody gets mistaken, a civilian in a wheelchair gets mistaken for a combatant and is killed by a drone. How do you grieve? How do you think about this, right? So the responsibility in AI systems is with people. And I think that my job as a technologist and as an educator and as an activist is to make sure that we build systems that expose the knobs of responsibility to people. And this takes thinking about which people can take responsibility and be accountable for particular steps in the process. There does not exist a single person or a single group of people, no matter how smart or how well-meaning, that would be able to shoulder this burden of, responsibility for AI systems working well. Because nobody can simultaneously put themselves in everybody else's shoes, right? Simple as that. So we do need to build a kind of a distributed accountability regime where we all collectively are controlling AI and it's helping us do things that it's good at. So AI, of course, is useful and it's fun, right? And more importantly, it can serve as our lens on the world. We can use AI to look at ourselves, to laugh at ourselves, to critique ourselves, to understand what are some of the impacts of the actions that we're taking. But we cannot use AI to fix everything in the world for us. And we cannot use AI to decide what the world should be like, right? What is this world that we want to see? This is up to people to decide. We can't outsource the work of being human to a machine in small decisions or in large ones. So what is AI? There isn't a definition that everybody agrees on, but I'll propose that we think of AI as a system in which algorithms use data to take actions or make decisions on our behalf, or help us act or make decisions. And I'm showing some examples of AI systems on this slide. On the top left is your smart vacuum. On the bottom right is chess playing AI that beat Garry Kasparov. And on the bottom left is self-driving cars, or an AI that is inside a self-driving car. Now, I want to use these and some other examples to give you a point of view on what I see as some of the hallmarks of responsible AI. And you see that autonomous cars are conspicuously missing on this slide now, because I don't actually think that we should be deploying or building them. I always use the bus as the thing that we should be building rather than a train. But yeah, I'm in full agreement with Ludo on this. All right, so here I'm adding, instead of a self-driving car, a smart light. So this is a kind of a smart home device that observes when lights are on or off and helps you save energy and saves you the need to get up from the couch to turn off the light, right? So presumably we could build such a system. And using these three systems here, I want to speak about three hallmarks of responsible AI that are kind of obvious in hindsight, right? The first one is that we are building these systems for some reason. There's some purpose that they serve. And in many cases, there's a clear need for improvement that, you know, if we make that improvement, it's consequential positively. Like, what is the clear need for improvement for Roomba? You know, the room is dirty, I don't want to clean it. It cleans it and I'm happy, right? So great. This is a task that can be automated. Smart light can save energy, both in terms of, you know, electric energy, but also the energy to me to get up from the couch. With chess playing AI, I'm not quite sure really what that need for improvement is, but this is just this curiosity that we've held as computer scientists, and you know, I identify with this group, where we really always wanted to just crack the game of chess. So, you know, it's maybe not that helpful, but it gives us this sort of satisfaction of being able to build a system that is able to do this. The second hallmark is technical readiness, right? None of these systems are easy to make. Roomba, the smart vacuum, this used to be the holy grail of planning, which is an area of AI. And I learned about planning systems like a smart vacuum before we were able to make them well. This was in the mid to late 90s when I was studying computer science in college. And in my AI textbook, these are the kinds of systems that are described, right? And it took us decades, and we now know how to make them. So amazing. Technical readiness is essentially about whether we have the appropriate data, hardware, algorithms, ability to create these systems, that it's not a pie in the sky kind of an idea, right? We can make them. And then the third hallmark that is related to both of these is that we can check whether these systems work. So a smart vacuum, you can check, is the floor clean after it went through the room? Yes, no, right? Chess playing, again, did it beat good chess players? Yes, therefore it works. Smart light, you can look at energy consumption, for example, and count how many times it turns off the light when you didn't want it to, things like this. So it's very, very important for us to articulate clearly what is it that we want these systems to do, and then how do we check whether they work. If we cannot do this, we cannot really take it on face that the system works. And here's a fourth hallmark of responsible AI that I'm going to motivate with a different example, and this is the use of AI in medical diagnosis, prognosis, generally, right? There are lots and lots of uses that we're seeing. Many of them are in pilot, but some are already making their way into clinical practice. So an example that I'm showing here is a little bit old, but I think it's still relevant. It's not an LLM or anything. It's actually an AI that is helping us create semi-synthetic magnetic resonance imaging scans. So you go into an MRI machine, but you spend 10 times less time inside the machine, which is great because if you are claustrophobic or like just feel uncomfortable, you don't want to be inside the machine longer than you must. And then also these machines are in short supply, so you get to improve throughput by allowing people to spend less time inside one. And then there is data that has been collected for particular demographic groups, right? We don't have universally good data for this, for particular types of diagnostic tasks that we can then use in conjunction with a kind of an outline that you get very quickly from this really fast MRI scan to fill in the blanks. And this is where AI comes in, right? It's actually learning a model and then filling in the blanks in this data set using data models and processing. And then it has been shown that fast MRI, this is the name of this particular system that was built by NYU Langone researchers together with Facebook AI, Meta now, but this was Facebook still when they were doing this work. They were shown to be diagnostically interchangeable under some conditions for some diseases with traditional MRI. And this is really great, right? But here, what we really must require is that the clinician, the person making the ultimate decision about the diagnosis, is able to understand whether or not to trust this semi-synthetic scan or to send the patient for a traditional one. Because ultimately, the decision is the person's, right? The clinicians. They can't just say, oh, the machine told me so, and therefore, you know, I misdiagnosed you. So this decision maker readiness and organizational readiness more generally is something that is crucial, because for consequential decisions, we will never, I hope, let AI run on its own autonomously. There will always be a human there, and we can't just say, oh, you were there, therefore you bear responsibility, right? We need to give this human the tools, the understanding to act with responsibility. I'm probably running out of time, am I? Let me give you this anecdote real quick. So have you seen this New York City chatbot? Yeah, I love the story. So this is now over a year old. So New York City has been kind of going back and forth on whether we want to try and be responsible in the way that we deploy AI in the public sector, in the private sector. And under the current administration, we've made several steps in the wrong direction on this. So our government, our mayor, authorized the release of this chatbot that replaces humans in their interactions with small and medium-sized business owners when these people call 311 and they ask, what forms should I file? You know, is this okay to do, legal, illegal, etc. Right? And so there was, of course, no public input solicited. This was an OpenAI tool that an OpenAI sort of originated LLM, and then a chatbot on top of that Microsoft sold to New York City. And of course, it was a fiasco that we were just waiting to see when it's gonna happen, and it did happen. So the chatbot falsely suggested that it's legal for an employer to fire a worker who complains about sexual harassment, doesn't disclose a pregnancy, or refuses to cut their dreadlocks. And so this is, a New York City endorsed, a government endorsed piece of software that gives advice to people that is illegal, right? It's problematic. At times, it's answered veered into the absurd. Asked if the restaurant could serve cheese nibbled on by a rodent, it responded, yes, you can still serve the cheese to customers if it has rat bites. Before adding that it was important to assess the extent of the damage caused by the rat and to inform customers about the situation. Right? Completely ridiculous. And yeah, they should have tested it better. They should have asked people if they wanted this. They should have articulated what it is that they need. I mean, the need for improvement is clear, right? I mean, people need better, faster advice. But none of the other criteria are met here. And then kind of the end of this is not the end of the story, right? The end, sort of, is that our mayor, when this went to the press, he said, we're not afraid of AI. We're just going to keep running it and it's going to fix itself. And it's still running, as far as I know. Right. So speaking of, LLMs and things like this, I like to speak to different audiences, and I feel comfortable in front of audiences. But 2 days ago, I found a way to make myself really, really uncomfortable. So I testified at a hearing at the U.S. House of Representatives of a committee on science, space, and technology on the topic of DeepSeek, a deep dive. You can find my testimony at this link there. This is a link to the official hearings website. There's also a recording of the thing. And I think that this is an opportunity for us, and that we as academics and as activists, we have a responsibility to speak up, but to find ways to speak that would not make people stop listening to us as soon as we utter the first word that we utter, right? So this requires a lot of guts, I think, but also a lot of careful thinking about how we can use this moment to push an agenda that we can stand behind, right? And we need to pick the hills that we're willing to die on, right? Is another way to put it. So what I spoke about is that DeepSeek, the kind of the framing here that was made by the Republican majority is that DeepSeek is threatening our competitive advantage and national security. DeepSeek is a Chinese company, and some people say that it's a startup, but most certainly not, right? This is backed by the Chinese government. They publish all of their research papers openly, describing the architecture of the system, and as much as any other vendor, essentially, their research transparency is higher than that of any other vendor that we know of, leading vendor. And many of their papers have over 100 authors, all of them having been educated in the Chinese system, right? So it's not a startup by any means. And it's a result of a government, other than ours, investing in, both AI development, but also figuring out what are the guardrails, what are some of the principles that should be embedded into, a regulatory framework. They have a regulatory framework around AI. We may not agree with the values that are embedded in it, but they have one and we don't. Okay, so this is a big differentiator. But anyway, the topics that I think speak to these concerns of national security and competitive advantage are that we should continue investing and step up our investment in academic research and openness, right? Rather than divest. That we should invest in creating a solid data protection regime. Because one of the concerns is that our data travels, the prompts you give, it goes to China and is stored on servers there. But then the question is also, where does our data go that when we prompt OpenAI's ChatGPT, right? We also don't know. So when we create a data protection regime, it better apply domestically as well as internationally. And the other thing that DeepSeek is making us think about, and this is actually along the lines of this whole responsibility, agency, and control conversation, is that they are a lot more transparent than our vendors of large language models. They publish information about how their models are built. They tell us, to some extent at least, how their systems were validated. They tell us what data they were trained on. They tell us lots of things. They publish model weights, right? And this is something that we should be doing more of as well, right? So these were the 3 recommendations that I made. And I think that, again, we should find ways to push on this narrative, but productively. I'm out of time. I'm quite confident. So you can take a look at my various research. I've done all kinds of things in this kind of responsible AI area. So explainability, what does it mean? Algorithmic hiring is a domain that I'm really interested in. I pushed for the regulation in New York City that we have local law 144. So I've done some auditing of hiring tools. We do work on responsible data management that I'm not going to get into, algorithmic fairness and what it means normatively, not just like, here's an algorithm, let's run it, and whatever comes out is fair somehow. As well as privacy and data protection in support of this kind of data protection regime that I'm advocating for. And I also do a lot of education and training, as I mentioned, so please take a look at our website. There's a public education course you can look at. We offer it through the libraries sometimes, and I hope to do it again. There's a comic book that goes along with it. It's available in English, Spanish, and Ukrainian. You can download it online. We do accessible education work. You saw Alice, and there's a lot of policy work that we also do. And I think that we should all hold on to our idealistic roots in this scary world. And that's the unicorn here, is helping me make that goal.